So it's time to vibe check the Edge of Fate and where we are right now. We're about 48 hours into the DLC being out. And before we get into how we're feeling about it, more specifically me, and I'll talk about the community sentiment as well. There will be no spoilers in this video because it's only been 2 days, and I will wait probably about a week before I give Edge of Fate a full review. Have had multiple playthroughs of the campaign. We also have the raid yet to come, and there is just generally a lot of content in this DLC that I was not expecting because it's supposed to be smaller, but it feels like there's a decent amount to chew on, and that's great. Now, again, I can't really talk specifics because I want to save some stuff for people who haven't played yet. Cut that. So, yeah, I can't really talk too much about story stuff yet because I want to save it for people who maybe are just trying to get a feel for what everyone's seeing from Edge of Fate. And listen, if you're one of those people who are checking the concurrent players numbers right now and you're seeing the numbers that we're all seeing, it's also important to remember it's July. It is the middle of summer. It is so hot outside, I have to say. It's unbearably hot in some places, but people are going outside, soaking in some sun. At least, normies are people who are no lifing or play this game for a career. Listen, of course they're playing, but there are a lot of people who would probably be playing that are not playing right now, and that's totally fine. Also, this is a launching point, so I don't think you need to use the same measuring stick that you would for, let's say, Final Shape. But yeah, I would say the numbers are a little concerning because you do want people to experience this initial DLC in the new saga so that they understand what's going on and they're part of the narrative that again I'm not going to talk about too much in this video. But this experience is always going to be here. It's not going anywhere. It'll probably be like $5 in a year or two, so you can buy it down the road when, there's a larger expansion with more significant story beats and, more imminent threats than maybe what we're experiencing in Edge of Fate. And that's the point of the first edition of a new saga is to build up to something. And so obviously the numbers aren't going to look too great because there's a lot of franchise fatigue as well. And yeah, the elephant in the room is, of course, the super horrible press that Bungie sometimes deservedly gets. But we're not going to talk too much about this in the video because, again, we're vibe checking Edge of Fate. And I think there are some things that definitely are blown out of proportion. Surprise, surprise. And this is something I actually kind of liked about the campaign. And if you don't know, there are these new traversal methods called Matter Spark, Matter Morph, and there's also a cannon, which is, it looks like Wardcliffe Coil. It shoots this void thing out and you can make some portals with it. And it's kind of like a puzzle you have to solve. Again, I'm not going to try to spoil it too much. But all of these methods are, different than just hopping on your sparrow or walking down a tunnel or whatever method for traversing you would normally use. Now, the final shape was very much a love letter to old Destiny. In fact, if you run through that story, you will probably feel a lot of similarities to Destiny 2's vanilla story, right? After the tower fell, you had to go and recollect the Vanguard leaders in Cade, Zavala, and Ikora, each on their own different planets slash moons. And that's very much the same thing we do in the final shape is we first find Cade, and then we find Ikora in the blooming, and then eventually we go and we find Zavala as well. So again, that was very much to salute the past, but now we're moving forward into a new story. And having these different methods of traversal, I think are purely just a way to shake things up. I do find it annoying not being able to use your sparrow, but once you do finish the campaign, this isn't a major spoiler, you do have the ability to transform into the Matter Spark Ball as well as teleport around the destination to your heart's desire, which is not something you can do initially. Of course, that is kind of similar to how destinations work in general. Sometimes you unlock a transmat zone after you complete the campaign. Sometimes you unlock the ability to use your vehicle after the campaign. Not something that isn't new. I do understand for the Matter Spark when you turn into a little ball, and you're in a tight space, the FOV is very wonky, and a lot of people were actually getting motion sickness from this. Those people, I feel horribly bad for you, and exclude yourself from what I'm about to say. I really enjoyed using Matterspark, and I still enjoy doing it because again, there's nothing like it in the game, and it makes it feel like a different game. And I think that was the goal, right? You've been playing this game for at least a little while if you're watching this video, and if you're someone like me, you might have been playing the entire time, and having something different to shake it up feels good. That being said, of course, not everyone's gonna like it. Of course, some people are gonna find it irritating, and that's fine. But if you are someone that is susceptible to motion sickness, they are putting a patch out, I think maybe 1 or 2 weeks down the road. So you might want to wait to play until then, which really sucks. But, you could always give it a try. I think it's still free to try, not Edge of Fate, but the rest of Destiny for a couple of days or one day. But that aside, I do think that the pacing of this campaign is what ultimately ruins it. It has a solid start, being introduced to Lodi and seeing all of this cool nine stuff and time distortions related to Kepler. But the middle parts are just a lot of busy work and, going and killing ads and doing these little missions here and there. The ending is quite possibly one of the best end missions in any campaign that we've had in a very long time. And I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that. But the build up to it could have been a lot better, I think. That being said, the dialogue is really good, and the voice acting from Lodi's voice actor is superb. The fill-ins, listen, I thought I was going to hate Deborah Wilson as Ikora, not because she's a bad voice actress, she's actually really good, but because she also voices Savathun. It's such a drastic change in character. Ikora is very stoic, and she doesn't show a lot of emotion all the time. And Savathun is the opposite. She's very cunning and jovial at times. She's also very sassy, I would say is a good word. Ikora, not so much. But because Deborah Wilson is so good, she takes Ikora and essentially puts her own spin on it, while not straying so far away from the character that her voice sounds too different. Reminds me a lot of Keith David stepping in for Lance Reddick. Sure, both of their voices are very distinct, and you would never get them confused, but Keith David made Zavala feel like Zavala still, honoring Lance Reddick while also honoring the character. And that's something really hard to do, and I don't think we can appreciate that enough. Of course, I think Ikora isn't as much of a beloved character because she's been through a lot of voice actresses at this point. First Gina Torres, and then the list has gotten longer leading up to Deborah Wilson. And Lance Reddick was just a staple in the community. He played the game, and of course always had his cameos and his random videos on Twitter that were such a joy to watch and listen to. Good news is, if this does bother you, they are actively re-recording these voice lines with Ikora's original voice actress from, the past year or so. And they're going to update them in-game at some point, so Deborah Wilson will go back to just being Savathun. But if SAG-AFTRA goes on strike again, you do have the ability to use other voice actresses and actors to fill in those roles, albeit temporarily. Now, again, I said I can't talk about the narrative. I don't want to. Again, I want to keep it spoiler-free. But the narrative is quite possibly the best narrative that we have had actually since the final shape. But let's sit back for a minute. The final shape was really good. Lightfall had its issues. Witch Queen was really good. Beyond Light had its issues. It's always been inconsistent. So to have final shape and then Edge of Fate be really solid back-to-back narrative experiences is phenomenal. And the way that this story gives the narrative to you is great. Throughout the missions you're doing in the beginning and the middle of the campaign, you're getting all this wonderful dialogue, little lore tidbits, and also lore books that you can read either before, during, or after the campaign. And then you also have a ton, and I mean a ton, of side quests, quite possibly the most side quests in any Destiny release that I have seen. And they give a ton of context to the story. And the great thing is, you can do this whenever. You can do it while you're running the campaign, you can do it in the middle of the campaign, or you can wait until the end when you've finished everything and do it then, because it will help you power up as well for the grind to end game if you want to hold off on doing that stuff. All while giving the story more context and more flavor. And of course, we still have the raid, so I'm sure the raid will have some tie-in narratively, maybe not as much as the final shape did, because that was literally killing the final big bad of the 10-year saga, whereas this raid might be killing a smaller fish in a bigger pond, and that's the way it goes. But if we look back at the first story narratively in Destiny's history in the Light and Dark saga, it was horrible. If you don't believe me and you never played the campaign, you can torture yourself if you want. I don't recommend it. But go watch all of the cutscenes for D1 Vanilla campaign. You will not know what is going on. But with this experience in Edge of Fate, it is very clear what is going on, and you can get it all from playing the story, and that is so important. Don't make me go watch Bife videos. Not that Bife does bad content, but I shouldn't have to watch a Bife video to understand what's happening. I shouldn't have to read every single page of a lore book to know what just happened. And I love that there are tidbits in this side quest that happen in lore tabs that you can also experience in game. And that is what people have been wanting, at least I have been wanting for a long time, is being able to experience all of the story in game, or at least 90-95% of the story in game. I get it, you gotta have your breadcrumbs in lore books and in lore tabs on armor and guns, but not allowing people to get a grip on the story through playing the game was always such a loss. And now it is a W. It's so good. So the cutscenes for Edge of Fate, in contrast to D1 Vanilla, of course, passage of time and all that, it does exist. Of course, the visual quality is so different. But again, the big difference is the story and the narrative, and it is a huge difference in that sense. So if you're just looking for a good story, this is, again, probably one of the best. I would maybe say, for me personally, top five. Again, we have had some really solid campaigns, but we've also had some really bad campaigns. This one is not one of them. Aside from that, I do think that the portal system is nice, I guess, but the bare bones that is now the world tab slash the old destinations tab, it feels so dead. You know that SpongeBob episode where they're making Krabby Patties in a factory and they're like gray? That's what the destination tab feels like. It's literally grayed out. It looks like the contrast was changed on that screen alone because they don't want you to play with that anymore. It doesn't feel good. And a big reason for this is you can only really level up sufficiently by doing portal stuff through Pinnacle Ops or Fireteam Ops or Solo Ops, or by playing on Kepler. No longer can you go back and do the most recent dungeon or the most recent raid and get decent loot that will also power you up. And I do think that's a net loss because, yeah, sure, I love doing the new stuff on Kepler. It's maybe not my favorite destination ever, but, it's just fun to do new stuff. Would I love to be able to go back and do old stuff to get new gear because you want to shake things up and you want to have a bit of diversity? Absolutely. And I do think that they need to, in some way, shape, or form, integrate some dungeons and other content into the portal. Now, again, this is something I'll probably touch on again in the full review because this is just 2 days into the portal being out. Adjustments will be made. And so what you're hearing in this video might not line up with what's happening now, but that such is the nature of a live service game, and that's just where we're at right now. And I can only do so many lost sectors and encore Kells Fall so many times before I don't want to do it anymore, and that sucks. But again, that being said, you have until Saturday to level up for the raid, which is 4 full days of playing to level up, which is kind of nice for anyone who maybe doesn't play the game a ton. So you have a little bit more time to at least get to entry, and you are capped at 100 power, which is not hard to get to at all. You basically just do the legendary campaign and you're there. So the price of entry is the lowest it's ever been. Of course, that doesn't mean you're gonna beat contest, but it does give you at least the opportunity to beat contest if you so choose. Right now, I don't think this is the best DLC that Destiny has ever had or that Bungie has ever released. And I don't think it's the worst. It's generally somewhere in the middle, which is ironic, but I think in the places that matter, like the story, it's really good. Obviously, the systemic changes to the game that have been made, it's going to take a little bit longer to have fully formed opinions on that stuff because most people are not to max power yet. So it's very hard to gauge this stuff. But if you enjoyed Final Shape or anything in between Final Shape and now, or even before the Final Shape, you're probably going to enjoy Edge of Fate. And again, the story is as good as it has ever been in game to experience. And as for everything else, it's kind of like a work in progress at this point. But that's it for me for now. I'll be back with a review, like I said, probably a week after Edge of Fate. And I will be running contest mode live here on YouTube as well as Twitch. I don't expect to get too far in it. I'm not a world's first raider, and neither is anyone in my team. But we're just going to look to have a good time, vibe, all that stuff, and see if we can't get deep into the raid or not. And yeah, anyways, thanks for watching, and see ya.